Hi, my name is Marlene McConnell, and this is my story of how I survived a brutal attack, a rape, and an attempted murder at my home. I was born in South Africa in a small town, and I grew up on a farm with my family. I'm one of six siblings, and I grew up with my mom and my dad, my brothers, and my sisters. After I left school, I started university. I was always a child that had big dreams. I believed that I could do anything, I could be anyone, and I could go anywhere in this world. And so when I went to university, I decided to become an attorney. And so I studied law. And the reason that I did that was because I believed in justice. I believed in fairness and I believed in equality. And I wanted to be of service. And it was great. On my very first day at university, during orientation, I met my bestest friend in the whole wide world. And it was just absolutely magical because we were in most of the same classes and we navigated university life together, and we are still best friends today. So when I was not a student at university, on weekends and holidays, I would spend my time working at a restaurant to earn extra money to support myself. And it was the wonderful summer holiday. And I remember being at the restaurant, finishing up the roster because the season came to a close. And I decided that instead of staying at the restaurant and returning for my shift later that evening, I would go home and have a chill afternoon. And so I got into my car and I started driving with the wind blowing in my hair. I was blasting my music and singing along until I started feeling that I should turn around and I should go back to the restaurant. And there were so many turnoffs on this road, and I just didn't take any of them. Every turn, I felt like I should turn around. And that was my intuition telling me something was not right. Because when I reached my apartment, what lay ahead for me was not the chill afternoon that I had envisioned. As soon as I got home, I ran up the stairs to put my bag down. Once I returned to the landing, someone grabbed me from behind, and I felt something cold pressed to my neck. At first, my mind tried to make sense of it, and I thought, why would my friend play this joke on me? Oh, what a jokester. But I soon realized this was no joke. Who is here? Walk, said the voice. With not knowing what was against my neck, I complied and I took the first step down the stairs. We would clear the rooms downstairs to make sure that no one else was home. And as we passed the front door, I could see the key that I had used just moments before to enter the apartment. It was close, yet so far. I could grab it, I could run, but I could also have my throat slit. And so in the absence of not knowing, I complied. We started walking back upstairs. And the moment we reached the top of the staircase, on the landing, the beatings immediately started. I wasn't sure what was happening. It was vile. It was brutal. It was harsh. This would continue for what felt like hours, until eventually the strangulation. It felt like I was breathing through the eye of a very small needle, until there was no more and I collapsed into what I thought was my death. Neighbors that have heard the scuffle called the police, and a captain who was patrolling in the area responded, and he was ready to solve this case. While I was being strangled, all I kept thinking was, Lord, don't let the baby girl, who was my sister's daughter, my niece, come home later to find my cold corpse. And with that last thought, I collapsed into what I thought was my death. I remembered hearing a rustling coming up the stairs, and the paramedics were called and they were on the scene. I remember before I was fully conscious, I remembered seeing these beautiful rays of light. I remember seeing yellow and orange light. And it was such a peaceful place. It was a place that was my protection within all of the chaos that I found myself in. And when the rays of light moved away, I realized in horror where I was and that the perpetrator was still in the apartment. He ransacked the apartment, and I could hear the sirens in the background. As he ransacked the apartment and left, I tried not to move. I tried not to breathe. I tried not even to look alive. When I was unconscious, my eyes were wide open. My mouth was open. I had particular hemorrhaging. I had all my other injuries and had a very, very low breathing rate. So my body had presented as dead. And that was what saved my life. When I heard the rustle, when I heard a commotion coming up the stairs, I was so afraid. I thought, is he coming back? I tried not to move, but it was the police and the paramedics. The paramedics immediately started working on me, and I just remember looking into the most beautiful blue eyes that I've ever seen in my life, and that was the eyes of Captain Van der Merwe. And he started asking all these questions, and looking back now, I can see that that was the first opportunity that I had to really speak about what happened that day. And I answered all of his questions while the paramedics were working. And he left. The paramedics then transported me to the ambulance and to the hospital, where I was met with a female doctor who was the district surgeon at our local public hospital. She would be responsible for processing my body and collecting evidence. As I laid in this room watching her, she asked very direct questions. She was a compassionate woman. I laid as she took all the scrapings and all the evidence, and I watched as she collected all my clothes and bagged my underwear. From the room outside, I heard the voice, a very familiar voice that I heard earlier. It was the voice of Captain Van der Merwe, and he was there with news for me and my family. 3 arrests have been made, and they were there for processing. Later that day, I would be discharged with antiretroviral drugs in case I was infected with HIV, my small trauma within my bigger trauma. My family was shocked and horrified. The drive home was in silence. Soon after, I was admitted to a private hospital, and I received care by a team of doctors. I spent close to 2 weeks in hospital recovering. Those first days were absolutely terrifying. I couldn't sleep for 3 days until eventually I just collapsed from exhaustion. If you've never ever fought for your life the way that I have, it's not an exhaustion that you will ever know. The fear, the anxiety, it was terrifying. All I wanted to do was be on alert all the time. Going back home with my parents after my hospital stay, I settled back in, and I had my siblings once again and my parents by my side, taking care of me, helped me get up. So hard to get up with broken ribs. Take me to the bathroom, feed me again. My close-knit family was there to support me. As I continued to heal, months went by, and soon I would have to go back and enter the world that I left behind, that was ripped away from me in such a traumatic way. But I didn't feel like going back to that life, because all I wanted to do was die. I kept thinking, how did I fight so hard for my life, and all I want to do is die? I remember having a conversation with my dad and telling him that I'm not sure I can do this. I'm not sure I can go back into this world and start this life. And I remember my dad telling me that one day you will look back at this event and it will have meaning. It will make sense to you. And so I was armed with antidepressants and the words of my father and the love of my family as I re-entered a world that was unfamiliar now, a world that now did not make any sense to me. The years that followed after this attack felt unfamiliar to me. I felt like everybody expected me to step back into a routine that was comfortable for them, because if I was back in my routine, it meant that I was healing. But I was not healing, and it wasn't that easy. First, I had to learn to speak about it. As much as I had the opportunity to speak about it, speaking to my family and speaking to my friends, I realized that it was traumatic for them to hear this. During my research, I discovered that my worldview was one where I grew up in a loving family. It was a world that was fair, it was just. And when this happened to me, it didn't feel fair, it didn't feel just. And I became so disconnected to who I was, the girl with the big dreams, the girl that could be anything in this world, the girl that could go anywhere. And during that time, I learned that these were not things that were happening in my society to people that I knew or to my friends or family. And that was what made it so difficult. There were 3 arrests made. One accused was set free because he was at the wrong place at the wrong time. The other 2 were detained and processed, and the court process took quite a long time. I took the opportunity to face my perpetrators. And while I was testifying about those details, as horrifying as it was, accused number 1 was laughing at me. And I carried on talking. I kept my eyes fixed on the prosecutor. I kept my eyes fixed on the magistrate. I looked at the stenographer and who was right below me, and I tried not to look his way. After my testimony, there were other witnesses that were called, including accused number 2, who was now a state's witness, who testified against the accused number 1. And we secured a conviction that was fair. It consisted of 2 life sentences, one for the attempted murder, 1 life sentence for 2 counts of rape, 10 years for housebreaking, and 5 years for burglary. And after that, I felt that this was justified. The perpetrator was in jail. I made peace with the fact that that accused number 2 was set free. And I thought that was going to give me closure, but it absolutely did not. I still felt the same. I still felt all of these feelings. I still felt angry. I still felt resentful. I still felt all the self-pity. I still felt all of the fear. My life was completely changed. So in those initial years, I tried to make sense of what was happening. And I understood that every time I was speaking to family members or to friends, their worldview also was shattered, the same way my worldview was shattered. And so I stopped speaking about this because I took my conversation about what had happened into talk therapy or psychotherapy. I spent years working with a psychologist and a sexologist in order to help me work through what had happened in the past, but also mainly how it had impacted my life on a daily basis. And it took some time, but I also worked with my sexologist to understand behavior patterns that I developed over that time, and to help me understand that if you are a survivor of violent trauma, the way that I survived rape and attempted murder, sometimes, you experience a level of promiscuity or confusion. And working with my psychologist, she helped me in those early years to understand that was completely normal, that this was a side effect of something that had happened. And that helped me a lot because I thought there was something wrong with me, but it wasn't. It was just a normal reaction to a very violent circumstances. I spent a lot of time working on how this impacted my daily routines. I really struggled at university. I couldn't concentrate. I was constantly on guard. I would check my apartment a million times. And so studying became a really big problem because every 5 minutes I'd be up, checking all the windows, under the bed, behind the door, because I needed to show my body that it was safe. But through therapy and talk therapy, I learned that I could show my body that it is safe, that it was safety that I was craving. That being in that state of constant fear was as a direct result of what had happened to me, but that I could take that fear and I could turn it into something different. I also learned how to deal with my emotions. I was very standoffish at some point. I didn't want to talk. And all of this I was processing alone inside me and in talk therapy. And so one day, a close family member gave me a referral, and I took this class. It was about self-love. And the teacher said, when we dealt with forgiveness, she said, my resentment keeps me safe. And out of everything that she read that day, that was the one that resonated with me. I realized I always sought safety, and resentment gave me that safety. I felt safe if I could keep everyone far away from me. And once I realized that, I sat down, and in a ritual that day, I wrote these letters, and I addressed these letters to all the villains in my life. And I acknowledged everything that happened, but I also saw these villains as people who were just broken themselves. I thought back to the day when I saw them at court with their family members. And I remember thinking, so many lives were ripped apart that day. So many lives changed. It wasn't only mine. There was the perpetrator's life. There was his girlfriend or wife that instantly became a single mother. There was the child that grew up without a father. There was the disbelief from the parents. This was a first offender, their son. There was the tensions between the families. I realized it wasn't just my life that was shattered, my world that was shattered that day, but it was shattered for so many others. And how could I not have compassion for them and then give the compassion to myself? And so as I near the closing of the letter, I signed it off. And later that day, in a burning ritual, I burned all those letters, and I could start feeling from that point onward, moving forward, day by day, how all of these dark emotions started to lift. There was still a lot of work that laid ahead, but it eventually started to lift. And as that started to happen, I started to reconnect to the self, because I was disconnected for such a long time. And despite the work that I did to connect with my body and teach it, there was still a level of disconnectedness that I was holding on to because I felt safe with it. It was familiar to me. I started to relinquish any doubts that I had, and I started really to trade it for self-worth, because I realized that I had an all-time low self-worth, even though I presented it as completely confident and so worthy. Deep inside, that wasn't what it was. I was constantly in doubt. I started to relinquish all self-criticism that I ever had, and I started trading it for self-compassion. I started to relinquish control, because I realized that all of this was bigger than me. And so I looked at my inner child through the work that we were doing, and I realized that little girl was still there. She was there, and I could reconnect with her, and I could make us proud. I could take it forward, and we could live a life that we are proud of. I learned to just let go of the past, and that meant that I had to step into the unknown, but it also taught me that I had to live in the present moment. So my book is called Ray of Light. It's available on Amazon.com, and the book is a rich tapestry of my story, and the stories, beautiful, incredibly stories of wonderful humans that have shared their stories with me. I hope that this book is inspirational. I hope that it inspires you to want a better life for yourself. And I hope that in some small way, there's something in my story that can help you in your life. My social links are below.